Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. What I'd like to do is kind of go over some of the basic things that I'd like for you to know before getting started with the course, graphing the cosecant and the secant function. The first thing, we're kind of understanding what exactly does cosecant and secant represent. How do we evaluate for them using unit circle? Because when I go ahead and teach, the parent graph, I use the unit circle to create a table. So it's very helpful to understand, one, what are the two functions, and then how do we evaluate them both using the unit circle. The next is, actually, I'm going to skip ahead and go to asymptotes. And that's very important because, remember sine, when we look to evaluate for sine, that was, your y coordinate. Well, if you're going to go and use a reciprocal function, which would be cosecant, that's 1 over y. So if y is 0, then we know that the cosecant function is undefined. And that is going to create an asymptote. And that is true also for the cosine and secant. So it's very important to understand, when we have a function that's undefined, when are we going to have asymptotes, and, how do we make sure we apply asymptotes in the correct place. And that is very helpful to know how to graph the sine and the cosine functions. I don't go into as much depth in this course as I do in sine and cosine and cotangent and tangent, because basically, if you can graph sine and cosine, you can graph cosecant and secant. We're pretty much going to be using graphing the full reciprocal function and then graphing or graph our cosecant or secant function based upon that value. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is just kind of the basics of what you need to know to be able to graph the cosecant and secant function. Thanks.